Picture this. You're about to share something important in a meeting. Your idea is good, you know it is. But as the moment approaches, your throat tightens, your heart races. And instead of speaking up, you stay silent. Again. Or maybe it's different for you. Maybe you're the person who keeps their camera off during video calls, who declines invitations, who says yes when people remember you exist, but never quite puts yourself forward, never quite steps into the light. Here's what you need to understand. This isn't shyness. This isn't introversion. This is something much deeper, something that started long before you learned to hide. There's a particular kind of invisibility that some people choose. Not because they want to be unseen, but because being seen feels dangerous. Like standing naked in front of a crowd, like waiting for a verdict you already know will hurt. Let me tell you about Emma. Emma is 28. She works in marketing. She's talented, her colleagues will tell you that. But in meetings, Emma has perfected the art of disappearing. She sits in the back. She prepares brilliant presentations but delivers them in a voice barely above a whisper. She deflects praise like it might burn her. When Emma finally sat across from a therapist, she said something revealing. I feel like if people really saw me, they'd be disappointed. This fear, this bone-deep certainty that visibility equals vulnerability equals pain, doesn't come from nowhere. It's learned, carefully, consistently, usually before we even have words for what's happening. To understand this, we need to talk about something psychologists call conditional positive regard. Carl Rogers developed this concept in the 1950s, and it remains one of the most powerful frameworks for understanding how we learn to hide. Here's how it works. Children need to feel loved and accepted. This isn't a want, it's a developmental necessity. When that love comes with conditions, when acceptance depends on meeting certain standards, children learn a devastating lesson. Their authentic self isn't enough. For Emma, this looked like a childhood where achievements were celebrated, but emotions were not. When she brought home perfect grades, her parents beamed. When she expressed fear or sadness or anger, they disappeared behind newspapers or told her to stop being dramatic. The message was clear. Your performance matters. Your feelings don't. So Emma learned to perform, and she learned to hide everything else. By the time she reached adulthood, hiding had become so automatic, she didn't even realize she was doing it. She just knew that being truly seen felt terrifying, like exposing something shameful, something that would make people turn away. But Emma's story is just one pattern. Let's look at Marcus. Marcus is 41. He's a senior developer at a tech company. Brilliant mind, terrible meetings. Whenever his boss asks for his input, Marcus freezes. Not because he doesn't have ideas, but because of what happens in his body when attention turns toward him. His hands shake, his mind goes blank. He feels, in his words, like he's about to be exposed as a fraud. Marcus's fear has a different origin than Emma's, but it leads to the same place. Invisibility as protection. Marcus grew up with a father who punished mistakes harshly. Not just scolded, punished, made him feel small, stupid, wrong. Every error was evidence of fundamental inadequacy. Every stumble was ammunition. Children in these environments develop what psychologists call hypervigilance. They become exquisitely attuned to potential threats. Their nervous system learns to interpret attention as danger. Being noticed means being evaluated. Being evaluated means being found wanting. Being found wanting means pain. So they learn to be very, very small. By the time Marcus entered the workforce, his nervous system was convinced that visibility was dangerous. Even positive attention triggered his threat response, because attention of any kind meant scrutiny, and scrutiny meant inevitable criticism. This is what trauma does. It teaches your body to remember danger, even when your mind knows you're safe. Now consider Rachel's case. Rachel is 34. She has a popular presence online, thousands of followers. But here's what's interesting. Rachel has never posted a picture of her face, never shared anything truly personal, never let anyone see the real her. She curates carefully. She shares quotes, aesthetics, thoughts that sound deep but reveal nothing. She's simultaneously visible and invisible, present but absent, seen but never truly known. But when we dig into Rachel's history, we find something clinicians call chronic invalidation. She grew up in a family where her experiences were routinely dismissed. When she said she was hurt, she was told she was too sensitive. When she was excited, she was told to calm down. When she tried to explain her perspective, she was talked over. Psychologist Marsha Linehan identified chronic invalidation as one of the core factors in developing what she called emotional dysregulation. But it does something else too. It teaches you that your inner experience is wrong, that who you really are is unacceptable, that the authentic you will be rejected. So Rachel learned to create a version of herself that was acceptable, palatable, safe. She became an expert at showing just enough to seem present without ever being vulnerable, without ever being truly seen. This pattern is more common than you might think, especially now, especially online, where we can craft carefully curated versions of ourselves, where we can be seen without being known. But there's a cost to this kind of visibility. A profound loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people who only know your mask. Let's talk about the mechanism behind all of this. The psychology of why hiding feels protective, even when we long to be seen. When you grow up learning that your authentic self is unsafe to show, something happens in your brain. Your amygdala, the part of your brain that processes fear and threat, starts treating authenticity as dangerous. Being real triggers the same response as being in physical danger. This isn't metaphorical. Your body genuinely believes that being seen will result in harm. That vulnerability will lead to rejection or criticism or abandonment or pain. So it does what it's designed to do. It protects you by making you small, by convincing you to hide, by flooding your system with anxiety whenever you're about to be truly visible. This is why you can logically know that speaking up in meetings is fine, that sharing your work is reasonable, that existing visibly is normal, and still feel terror when you try to do it. Your nervous system is operating on old information. Information gathered when you were small and dependent, and actually vulnerable to the people around you. Psychologists call this a conditioned fear response. And here's the thing about conditioning. It doesn't care about current reality. It only cares about past patterns. Meet David. David is 56. He's accomplished by any standard, published author, respected in his field. But he still struggles with something that started when he was 8 years old. David was a sensitive child, artistic, different. In his working class neighborhood, this made him a target, not just for bullies, but for his own family. His father saw his sensitivity as weakness. His brothers mocked him. Even his mother, while loving, couldn't quite hide her disappointment that he wasn't like other boys. The message David internalized wasn't just that his interests were wrong. It was that his fundamental nature was unacceptable. That who he was at his core was shameful. So he learned to hide it. He developed what psychologists call a false self, a version of himself that was acceptable to others but fundamentally disconnected from who he really was. Decades later, even after building a successful career, even after finding people who appreciate exactly what his family rejected, David still feels that old shame when he's truly visible. Still hears those voices telling him he's too much or not enough or fundamentally wrong. This is what psychologist Donald Winnicott meant when he wrote about the false self. It's a protective adaptation, a way of surviving environments that can't accept who you really are. But it comes at an enormous cost. You lose connection to yourself. You spend your life performing a version of you that will be accepted, while the real you stays hidden, unseen, slowly suffocating. The cruel irony is this: the people who are most afraid of being seen are often the ones who have the most to offer. They're sensitive, perceptive, deep. They see things others miss, feel things others skim over. Their inner world is rich and complex and valuable. But they've learned to believe it's shameful. Consider Sarah's experience. Sarah is 29. She's a writer who has never shown anyone her work. Not once. She has notebooks full of stories, essays, poems. Some of them are genuinely good. But the idea of letting anyone read them fills her with a dread so intense she sometimes physically shakes. What Sarah doesn't realize is that her writing isn't the issue. Her writing is her trying to be seen. Her stories are her reaching out, saying, "This is what it's like to be me. This is what I see. This is what I feel." And the terror she experiences at the thought of sharing them. That's the fear of being truly known, of offering her inner world and having it rejected. Sarah grew up in a family where emotional expression was viewed as attention-seeking, where sharing feelings was considered manipulative, where vulnerability was weakness and weakness was contemptible. So Sarah learned to keep her inner world private, secret, hidden. And now, even though she's an adult living thousands of miles from her family, even though she's surrounded by people who would likely appreciate her work, she can't bring herself to share it. Because sharing it feels like standing in the middle of her childhood living room and admitting she has needs, has feelings, has a self that wants to be acknowledged. And that still feels dangerous. This brings us to an important distinction. What we're talking about isn't the same as healthy privacy or reasonable boundaries. There's nothing wrong with choosing what to share and with whom. That's wisdom. What we're examining is something different. The compulsive need to hide, the inability to be seen even when you want to be. Even when being invisible is making you lonely. Even when hiding is causing you to miss opportunities, relationships, experiences. That's not choice. That's fear dressed up as preference. And say, what changes this? How do you move from hiding to being seen? The answer isn't simple, but it starts with understanding something crucial. You're not broken, you're adapted. You developed these protective patterns for good reasons. They helped you survive environments that couldn't hold your authentic self. The problem isn't that you learned to hide. The problem is that you're still hiding in environments where it's safe to be seen. For Emma, change began when she started working with a therapist who practiced what Rogers called unconditional positive regard. For the first time in her life, someone was genuinely interested in her inner experience without judgment, without conditions. without the need for her to perform. Hell was terrifying at first. She spent weeks deflecting, intellectualizing, performing. But gradually, carefully, she began to let herself be seen. To express feelings she'd learned were unacceptable. To discover that vulnerability didn't lead to rejection. This is the foundation of healing this particular wound. Experiences that contradict what you learned. Relationships where being real is safe. Environments where your authentic self is welcomed rather than punished. And Marcus found healing through a different path. He worked with a somatic therapist who helped him understand that his fear response wasn't a character flaw. It was his nervous system doing exactly what it was trained to do. Together, they worked on what's called nervous system regulation, teaching his body that attention doesn't always equal danger. That visibility doesn't always lead to pain. This involved exposure, gradually, carefully putting himself in situations where he was visible, but with support, with tools to manage his nervous system's response, with the understanding that feeling afraid didn't mean he was in danger. Rachel's journey involved something different, learning to tolerate discomfort. For years, she'd avoided true visibility because it felt uncomfortable, vulnerable, risky. Her healing involved recognizing that discomfort isn't the same as danger, that you can feel scared and still be safe. Jessie started small, sharing something slightly more personal, letting people see a bit more of her real self. Not everything at once, that would have been overwhelming, but gradually expanding what she was willing to reveal, testing whether her fear was accurate. Learning through experience that being seen didn't lead to the rejection she expected. For David, healing involved grief. Grieving the childhood he deserved but didn't get, the acceptance he needed but wasn't given. He had to feel the pain of that loss before he could move forward. This is something many people skip, and it keeps them stuck. You can't heal what you won't feel. But after the grief came something else. Anger. Healthy anger at what was done to him. At the injustice of having to hide who he was. That anger, directed appropriately, became fuel for change. For refusing to keep living small. For reclaiming the parts of himself he'd buried. Sarah's path involved creativity itself. She joined a writing group where the focus wasn't on critique, but on witnessing. People read their work, others listened. That was all. No judgment, no evaluation. Just being seen. The first time Sarah read her work aloud, she cried. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of finally being witnessed. Of offering her inner world and having it received without rejection. That's what changes everything. Experiences that prove your fear wrong. Relationships where you can be real without being punished. Environments where visibility doesn't equal vulnerability. Here's what I need you to understand. The fear of being seen isn't about you being flawed. It's about you being hurt. About learning, through painful experience, that authenticity wasn't safe. That visibility led to pain. You're not hiding because you're weak. You're hiding because you're adapted. Because you survived an environment that couldn't hold the real you. And now you're carrying those adaptations into environments where they're no longer necessary. That our work isn't about forcing yourself to be visible. It's about slowly, carefully creating experiences that prove you're safe to be seen. It's about finding people and places where your authentic self is welcomed. Where vulnerability is met with compassion. Where being real doesn't lead to rejection. This takes time. It takes patience. It takes courage, not the courage to be fearless, but the courage to be scared and show up anyway. And it requires something else. It requires you to challenge the story you've been telling yourself about what it means to be truly seen. To question whether your fear is still accurate, whether the danger you're protecting yourself from still exists, whether the people around you now are the same as the people who taught you to hide. Most of the time, they're not. Most of the time, the danger is old, the threat is past. The people who made visibility painful are no longer in your life. But your nervous system doesn't know that. So you have to teach it. Gently, gradually, through experiences that prove visibility can be safe, that being seen can be beautiful, that you can be truly, completely, authentically yourself, and not only survive, but thrive. That's not easy, but it's possible, and it's worth it. Because hiding isn't just about avoiding pain. It's about missing connection, missing opportunities, missing the profound relief that comes from being known and accepted anyway. You deserve that. Not the version of you that performs, not the carefully curated self you show to stay safe. The real you, the one you've been hiding, the one you're afraid to let people see. That version of you deserves to be witnessed, accepted, valued, just as you are. And in somewhere, there are people waiting to see you. The real you, if you're brave enough to let them.